there is no formula. Some people may stick to their spreadsheets, and I know people who do, but there is no standard formula. That's really the take-home message.
Can I also say this when you go to restaurants, running a restaurant, tough gig. Food? 8%,
Absolutely.
8% margin. That's all you're going to get on a food. You've got to make it up in booze where you do it. That's just the reality.
Totally.
Yeah.
Joelle, thank you very much for that. Med Reds, that's a little bit of a heads up.
That's the take-home, isn't it?
That's the take-home. I didn't know that. Joelle Thompson is an author, writer and wine advisor. And there's nothing nicer than a really good glass of wine in moderation.
In moderation.
Yeah. Nice book. Winter by the Fire, Ruth, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah. Locally grown, Waiheke Island represent.
Waiheke Island. And regarding mending, we didn't really get time to this. I have a favourite Levi's denim shirt, which has big tears and it can't be mended. It's been hanging in my wardrobe for 5 years, but I refuse to throw it out, but don't trust myself to mend it, says Dave.
Iron-on patch. Get an iron-on patch.
Iron-on patch.
Do it on the inside. It'll be tickety-boo. Off the spotlight.
Nice advice. Ruth Money, Shane Tepo, thank you very much.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, a 6-hour phone wait to book a COVID jab in Northland, and frustrated seniors turned away because they don't have an appointment. Ron's 87 in a couple of weeks. He reckons it should not be this hard, and someone needs to pull finger. More from him shortly. Pacific church leaders, well, they lead by example en masse, rolling up their sleeves for the vaccination. The man who believes a boy's home was basically a criminal apprenticeship that turned him into a monster. We dig deeper into the government's promises around shovel-ready projects and the jobs they're supposed to create. In Ashburton, whatever it takes, whatever that means, the town's jettisoning its tired tagline.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. Northlanders are waiting on the phone for hours as they try to get appointments for the COVID vaccine, with some older people being turned away from walk-in clinics. The District Health Board last week opened up the eligibility criteria to anyone over 50 as it tries to meet its lagging vaccine targets. Local GP Dr Andrew Miller says people are no longer able to walk in without an appointment, but they can't get through to the booking number either.
I've got a fair number of frustrated both staff and patients who are struggling to get bookings, knowing that the system's now not seeing walk-ins. They're trying to actually book a time and finding it difficult to get through and actually find a time to have it done. So there's a fair amount of frustration.
Whangarei GP Dr Andrew Miller says a lack of communication and resources are likely the causes of the backlog. Checkpoint will have more on this story after this bulletin. The National Party has labelled the Finance Minister irresponsible for his plans to reallocate an extra $1 billion of unspent COVID-19 cash. The funding has been unearthed by ministers after Grant Robertson asked them to take another look at where the money divvied out last year had been spent. Mr Robertson says the money will be returned to the COVID-19 war chest to be spent on the economy's recovery. The opposition leader Judith Collins says it seems wasteful.
Yeah, it's pretty worrying when they find $1 billion down the back of the couch, not knowing it was there. It wonders what else is down the back of the couch, doesn't it?
National says the government should simply reduce its borrowing. The Trade Minister has warned his parliamentary colleagues that declaring the treatment of Uyghur Muslims as genocide will hurt our trade relationship with China. The ACT Party intends to put a motion to Parliament tomorrow to debate such a declaration. Here's political reporter Katie Scotcher.
The relationship between China and New Zealand continues to be described as significant, important and long-standing. But there are tensions created by an increasingly assertive China in the region and a volatile international environment. Damien O'Connor says there's no doubt New Zealand's trade relationship with China, its largest trading partner, would suffer if the treatment of Uyghur Muslims is declared as genocide. It's not yet clear if Labour and National will support the motion, but it does have the backing of the Green Party. Ātuiti whare parimata, ko Katie Scotcher aho.
RNZ understands discussions about the wording of the motion are currently underway. The disgraced New Zealand businessman Ron Briley has given up his knighthood after last month pleading guilty to possessing child sex abuse material. The forfeiture comes after the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern started moves to strip Riley of the title and honour. The 83-year-old will no longer be allowed to use the title Sir and has been asked to return his insignia. In a statement, Ms Ardern says the Queen has been informed. A survivor of abuse in state care says most residential boys' homes were run along strict hierarchical lines by the boys themselves. Daniel Ray, who is 47, spent time in a number of boys' homes in the late 1980s. He's told the inquiry into abuse in state care that while staff were in charge, they allowed the boys free range.
The older boys were used as overseers, and because they had internalised a hierarchical structure, and, from within, then that was it. That was what everyone had to adhere to. So the boys had come up with this stuff inventively over time.
Daniel Ray says staff turned a blind eye to violence amongst the boys. The Independent Police Conduct Authority has found 2 officers were justified in firing shots at a wanted man in a high-speed pursuit on Auckland's northern motorway. The man suffered minor injuries and no one else was harmed during the incident in October 2018. Amy Williams reports.
The remand prisoner had escaped from the Waitakere District Court 2 days earlier. When found, he fired a shotgun at police and escaped with another man who was sought for arrest. 2 Armed Offenders Squad officers driving behind the fleeing car at high speed fired separate shots at the man. The pursuit ended when the fleeing car ran out of petrol. The IPCA found that the officers were justified in firing shots at the man because of their specialist training and understanding of the risks involved. Ko Amy Williams, Tēnei.
It's coming up to 5 minutes past 5. None of the 10 New Zealand cricketers involved in the IPL in India are looking to come home despite growing doubts about the future of the competition. 2 Indian players from the Kolkata Knight Riders tested positive for COVID-19, forcing last night's game against Royal Challengers Bangalore to be postponed. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
All up, there are 10 New Zealand players involved in the IPL, but in a statement, Heath Mills of the Cricket Players Association says none have requested to come home yet, but they're continuing to monitor developments. There are also 6 New Zealanders involved in coaching roles in teams. The Kolkata Knight Riders side, where the 2 players tested positive, contains New Zealand players Lockie Ferguson and Tim Seifert, while former Black Caps captain Brendan McCullum is head coach. Kay Williamson Sunrisers Hyderabad and Trent Bolt's Mumbai Indians are scheduled to play later today, but that match is now in doubt. This is Stephen Hewson.
The former Silver Fern shooter Margaret Forsyth has died after a battle with cancer. She was 58. First selected for the Silver Ferns in 1979 as a 17-year-old, Forsyth played 64 tests, including 3 World Cup tournaments, and was twice in the winning team in 1979 and 1987. Her first test was against Jamaica, and she became part of a formidable shooting combination with Margaret Martinga, the pair being dubbed the Two Margs. Forsyth took up coaching and was head coach of the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic in 2017 and 2018. That's the news.
Our High Commission in India sets up a health unit.
They've been working in extraordinary circumstances in order to support and serve New Zealanders abroad.
COVID-19 infiltrates the Indian Premier League.
We don't know if the virus breached the security bubble, and that has also created a sense of fear among the players.
And there are fears the Pacific is vulnerable.
If the COVID-19 enters the Cook Islands, we had only one phrase: we will be kaput, K-A-P-U-T.
Trouble bubbling. Morning reports, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, including Taumaranui and Taupo, fine weather. Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine with patches of fog inland tonight. Taranaki to Kapiti, including Taihape, partly cloudy with isolated light showers about the ranges. Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine weather. Canterbury, fine today, partly cloudy tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy with isolated showers, but rain south of the glaciers with heavy and possibly thundery falls tonight. Rain spreading north late. then clearing to fine from about Hokitika southwards tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland scattered rain, clearing and becoming fine tomorrow morning. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods tonight, fine weather tomorrow. RNZ National, it's coming up to 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Northlanders are waiting on the phone for more than 6 hours as they try to book appointments for their COVID vaccine, while older people are being turned away as they attempt walk-in appointments. Tai Tukaro opened up its vaccine eligibility to include anyone over 50 last week to try to get more people across the line. But that's led to huge pressure on booking systems and frustration that those with high risk factors aren't being seen. Nita Blake-Person filed this report from Whangarei.
Northland District Health Board is at the bottom of the table for its vaccine rollout. Figures out last week put it almost 4,000 doses short of its target. So in a bid to try and boost those numbers, it's dropped its eligibility criteria right back. Anyone over 50 is able to get a shot. But actually getting the vaccine is a different story.
I spent all day yesterday from 9 till 4:30 on the phone every quarter of an hour ringing, and I got no response. And I thought I'd come down here today because it was the next day they were doing it, and they're full, booked. I can't get a booking. They can't tell me how to get a booking. Put your name down and they might ring you.
Whangarei woman Gay is desperate for her vaccine. She was turned away from Seminoff Stadium today where shots were being administered.
I've got proof here that I've got compromised condition, both myself and my husband, and I'm 78. Well and truly within the, it looks as though I'm in the level. I'm not just 50. People 50 here are coming up and getting done, but I can't.
She wasn't the only one. Pōpi Tahiri came down to try have a go after having no luck on the phone.
Just can't get in. So it's like everybody else, I think. Jammed up and you miss out. That's all.
Are you worried?
Nah. But I got another day tomorrow and another day after that. 2 more days.
Janie Rakin had a booking for her second vaccine today, but says her friends in whānau haven't been able to get in.
It was the waiting time. They ringing up the 0800 number, and many of them just turned around, and work colleagues turned around and said, they've tried 8 times in one day, and how long is it going to be?
Te Ropupoa is the chief executive of Te Hauora o Ngāpuhi. She says it's not good enough that older people are being turned around, and it's communication that's letting the DHB down. She says there needs to be messaging across the board around the vaccine, not just for one audience.
There's targets that need to be met, and it seems obvious that 1 day a week in kaikohe may not be enough, and so we need to be open to review to accommodate the need in terms of our communities.
Online, people have complained about trying for a week to get an appointment. They've labelled the rollout a shambles. Local GP Dr Andrew Miller says he's hearing it too.
I've got a fair number of frustrated both staff and patients who are struggling to get bookings, knowing that the system's now not seeing walk-ins. They're trying to actually book a time and finding it difficult to get through and actually find a time to have it done. So there's a fair amount of frustration.
And he's putting it down to poor communication and a lack of resources.
We have a willing workforce in primary care, pharmacy, general practice, Māori providers who are asking for access to the immunisation register, the booking system, and to being able to get the vaccine, because we're experts of vaccination. We're ready to go. There's been a hold up with funding for primary care, and now there seems to be a hold up in the IT side of it. So we've got a willing workforce, we've got a needy community wanting it, and at the moment, through lack of resource and looks like some less than ideal communication, we aren't getting where we want to be.
In a statement, Northland DHB Chief Executive Dr Nick Chamberlain said demand for the vaccine had been greater than expected. He said extra staff had been called on to address the backlog of requests, so people who have emailed or called the 0800 number should hear back in the coming days. Northland DHB's highest number of vaccinations so far was last Wednesday, when it administered 888 shots. For Checkpoint, Cornita Blake-Person, Aho.
A Northland Grey Power rep says it should not be this hard for seniors to get their COVID jab, and it's stressing people out. Ron Thompson's calling on health officials to get their act together and bring GPs in on the rollout. When we talked, Ron wanted to make sure his language wasn't too ripe for radio.
I can express myself explicit.
Go for it.
It's a shambles. I've got a chap, a good mate, that's a year older than me, and he's been trying to phone them. He's got a serious problem. He's got an aneurysm problem, and he's petrified with that. And he wants to get his injection to make cover all bases, and he can't get any satisfaction on the phone. His wife sent emails, and the emails haven't been answered. I've since spoken to him about his situation. I've got two other men in their very late 70s, and they can't get an injection. And now I'm finding that there's been people down there queuing. I don't know where they're queuing in Whangarei. They've waited 2 to 3 hours. That's ridiculous. Why can't our local doctors send the number of patients or clients that they've got into a control centre, and they just process it? With these computers, they can do everything. And
so, Ron, your buddy who you say has been trying to ring and all the rest of it, you said he's a year older than you. So how old are you, Ron?
I'm coming up in a couple of weeks, 87.
Right, so your mate's 88, right?
That's right.
And he can't for love or money get a hold of them on the phone?
No. And he is really stressed, I can tell you. He's a fantastic bloke. He's been my boss on 2 occasions. He was my general manager in various situations. And it's really concerning. And it upsets me because to date, the emergency services and the hospital up here have been absolutely precious and most appreciated.
So should it be this hard?
No, that's what I can't understand. There's no common sense in our world today, and this is highlighting communication problems in general.
So would you like to be able to roll up to your local GP, Ron, and get your doctor, who you know, to give you the jab instead?
Yeah, but he hasn't got a fridge. Now, why can't you get a refrigerated truck and put the vaccines in and just say to the doctors, unless there's an emergency, our surgery will concentrate on vaccines today before we get a power lossage or anything puts the vaccine at risk.
So what's it doing to stress levels of people you know and seniors who are keen to get this done?
Put it up. It puts their stress, increases their stress level.
Well, that's no good, is it, Ron?
No. But I'm on the lucky side. I've had a good life, and I've had ups and downs, but I've seen enough of the life that I just worry what is happening.
So have you had a crack at making a booking yet, Ron, for you to get the jab?
No, to be quite honest, I'm not panicking to get the jab.
Right, why is that? You're not planning to head offshore or anything like that? So
No. I've only got 2 bucket list trips to do. One's to Fiji, that's out. One to Australia, that's very difficult now. And I had a stroke in January, and then I got readmitted with respiratory problems. And while I was in hospital, a lady was running around the North Island, and there was panic with her. And the hospital closed, put me in confinement, because that's part of their emergency pattern. Anybody with a respiratory problem hence they treat you for coronavirus.
So, Ron, what's your message to the people who are in charge here of this rollout? What's your message about how they should be dealing with seniors?
Well, just have a look at it and get your act together.
And that was Ron Thompson from Greypower, Northland. In a statement, the Northland DHB says it's establishing a call centre so that the community can easily request an appointment, and this will make the process much easier for everyone. It is almost 18 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ken's got in touch while that interview was playing and he says, I've just checked my phone. I called Northland DHB vaccination booking number 30 times today. Yep, you heard right there, 30 times, Ken says. When it went through, it wasn't answered. Most times engaged, 3 times a message. The GSM number you have called is unavailable. Cheers, says Ken, 67 years old. Don't know if that's cheers or not, Ken. I'm wondering how many others of you are experiencing that. Homai o whakaaro, love to hear from you. Are you in Northland? How's it been for you getting your vaccine? Have you tried that number that Ken is talking about, and how did that go for you? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or our email is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And still to come on the program, Ashburton needs your help. The council's voted to ditch its very tired tagline. We talked to the mayor, but what ideas have you got? The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, has unearthed nearly $1 billion of unspent COVID cash to fatten up this month's budget. The man with his hands on the purse strings now has a new job too, a de facto delivery czar, ensuring every penny is spent as promised. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Last year it was the COVID budget. This year,
this will be a recovery budget.
A recovery budget with COVID-19 still very much front and centre. It was a carefully crafted speech that Grant Robertson delivered to business boffins in Wellington this morning, and it came with a near $1 billion surprise.
As part of the budget preparation, I asked each minister to look again at the areas of the COVID spending for which they were responsible to see if it was still needed or still a priority, and whether underspends could be reprioritised. This exercise has yielded around $926 million worth of savings.
That gives the minister nearly $1 billion more to play with. He says it will go back into the COVID war chest to be spent rebuilding the economy. He named 3 core goals for this term: keeping the virus out, accelerating the economy and tackling the triple crises: housing, climate and poverty.
The government is determined that we deliver on these core priorities.
So determined, it's setting up a new delivery unit, a crack team in the PM's department, tasked with ensuring the government keeps its promises. It comes after the spectacular failures of KiwiBuild and Auckland Light Rail last term. Non-delivery, supposedly no more.
This is best practice. I think it's about getting value for money and delivering on the commitments that we made in COVID.
It was a vote of no confidence by Grant Robertson and his cabinet colleagues. Mind you, he's probably right. They couldn't actually deliver Uber Eats, could they?
National's Judith Collins is heaping scorn on the idea. She's hardly filled with confidence. A team of ministerial babysitters and money left unspent.
Yeah, it's pretty worrying when they find $1 billion down the back of the couch, not knowing it was there. It wonders what else is down the back of the couch, doesn't it?
But extra money's the type of problem you want to have as Finance Minister. The difficulty comes with who gets what. It's been revealed that Labour's Maori MPs have made a fierce appeal to the Housing Minister for a greater share of the budget for Maori. Today, everyone's seeking to downplay that dispute.
These negotiations can be robust.
We've had these debates. It's called a healthy democracy.
I just want to categorically deny that there's any rift.
There hasn't been any more robust debate about budget funding than there is in any budget process.
And those debates continue. 16 days till the budget. 16 days for those last-minute pitches. Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Craig McCulloch ahu.
The Trade Minister has issued a warning to his parliamentary colleagues. Declaring the treatment of Uyghur Muslims as genocide will hurt New Zealand's trade relationship with China. The ACT Party intends to put a motion to Parliament tomorrow to debate the treatment of the minority and declare it as genocide. Political parties considered their positions at caucus today, but they also had a warning from the Trade Minister to consider. Here's our political reporter, Katie Scotcher.
The relationship between China and New Zealand continues to be described as significant, important and long-standing, but there are tensions created by an increasingly assertive China in the region and a volatile international environment. New Zealand walks a fine line between China, its largest trading partner, and the more hawkish stance of close allies, most notably Australia towards China, within the broader Five Eyes alliance. And Trade Minister Damien O'Connor has warned of the potential consequences if MPs declare the treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang as genocide.
Clearly the Chinese government wouldn't like something like that.
Damien O'Connor was asked what it would mean for trade.
No doubt it would have some impact. That's hardly rocket science.
New Zealand's trade relationship with China would likely have been a big part of discussions for both Labour and National as they considered the motion today.
Is New Zealand beholden to China effectively?
If you're looking at trade at the moment, clearly we are in terms of trade. So 29-30% of our trade goes to China. It's the elephant in the room, isn't it, when we discuss issues like this?
National leader Judith Collins has been coy about whether she believes the treatment of Uyghur Muslims is genocide.
I think we take this very seriously, and at the same time we're aware if the government has information that they haven't shared, they should share it pretty quickly, I think, with MPs. I think it's the right thing to do so people have it.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has also refused to share her personal view, pointing instead to the international law that guides the use of the word genocide.
My view and the view of many members of the international community, of course, is that when you step into language like genocide, there is international law that sits around the use of that. The international community, New Zealand amongst them, has been calling for the ability, unfettered access for independent individuals to go in and to be able to establish whether or not that indeed is occurring.
Jacinda Ardern says the government has already expressed its grave concerns about the human rights abuses against ethnic Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang. It's not yet clear if Labour and National will support the motion to debate the treatment of the Muslims, but it does have the backing of the Green Party. Atuiti whare parimata mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
RNZ understands discussions about the wording of the motion are currently underway. Ashburton, whatever it takes. Well, apparently it takes a snappier slogan than that to sell the town. Ashburton district councillors have unanimously voted to ditch the tired tagline that's loathed by some and mocked by others. So an awesome opportunity awaits Ashburton. Mayor Neil Brown workshopped a few ideas with me.
Well, I think the people of Ashburton have just got over it. We've had it for probably 10 to 12 years, and it was our economic development arm that used it, whatever it takes. So we've probably got there now, so it's time for a new one.
What did it even mean?
Whatever it takes, you can have many connotations in there as to do whatever you like, or we'll do whatever it takes to get whatever you want to get, I suppose. It's 10, 12 years old, so it's been around for a wee while. The people who invented it are probably no longer here anymore.
So has it sort of got a whiff of the stale about it now?
I think it has, yes it has. We're ready for a refresh now, I think. So the councillors, I've got 9 of them, and they've all agreed that it's time to move on and let's get a new logo for Ashburton.
So, well, you want to leverage off your best selling points, don't you?
You do, it's best we do, yep.
Yeah, so what are they?
We're an agricultural-based district here, so we have everything from dairy, sheep, wool, vegetables. In the vegetable line, we grow peas, corn, broccoli, carrots, potatoes, onions, you name it, we just about grow it. And even better from that, if we don't grow it, we'll grow the seeds here to grow it. So we have all that. We also have wheat and barley, the old staple varieties. So we get the bread and the beer that people drink and eat. It comes from the grains that we grow here as well. And we also have deer, venison. We've pretty much got everything here agricultural base-wise in Ashburton.
Oh, so maybe Ashburton, the smorgasbord of the south?
That might be a good one. That might be a good one. Or another one I've been thinking of is the heart of the mainland, because we're right in the middle of the South Island, and the South Island, of course, is the mainland, and we're being in the middle, so the heart fits there. And our industries that we have here, fit being right in the middle for what we do.
So why not just go with Ashburton halfway?
It could be a suggestion. I think what we might do is put it out to the people of Ashburton and even further afield to come up with their slogan and make it into a wee bit of a competition.
Okay, well, I've had a really unscientific whip around, right? And I'm going to put a few suggestions to you, Mr. Mayor, and just if I can get your immediate reaction on some of them. Ashburton, not as big as Rolleston.
Well, that would be correct, but big is not always best, is it?
Okay, all right, we'll move on then. Ashburton, we're on fire.
At times we do have a wee dry, it is quite dry here at times, and we do have the odd fire get out of control, but I don't think that one's a runner.
Okay, so we want to focus on the positive. This is a good one. Ashburton, we've got car parks.
We certainly have them. We have plenty of flat land here for putting car parks on, so yep, if you want to park your car, you can certainly do it in Ashburton, plenty of room.
Okay, well, what about leveraging off maybe some of high-profile people who've visited or have got an association with Ashburton? Here's one for you. Ashburton, Shipley Muller Falloon.
Yep, Todd Muller, he visited. Falloon was our MP and Shipley was our MP and also became the Prime Minister. So, yeah, there's a wee link there. I'm not sure whether... but we're a Labour electorate now, so all those candidates were national, so not sure if it would fit anymore.
Okay.
Let's see what the people think.
We've got some more options. Ashburton for a pie and a pea.
Well, you can certainly do both here, yeah. We have certainly some good pies and we have some good toilets. We've lots of toilets get rated quite highly, clean and presentable. And because the tourists come through, and if you want to head south, you've got to come through the Ashburton district, and we have toilets here that can accommodate them, and also cafes where they can buy their pie.
Okay, and this one, Ashburton, average.
Doesn't really do it for me,
actually,
Ashburton being average.
Sorry, Neil, the words have just gone off the page here. It's Ashburton, average high, 17 degrees.
Yeah, great climate. Not too hot, not too cold. Just a nice, pleasant climate.
You're all about accentuating the positive, aren't you?
Well, that's the job, isn't it? Keep everything positive, and you'll get there if you keep everything positive.
So, if we're being truthful, if we look back, that list we've gone through, and we look back at the slogan you had, well, is it gone officially yet? Is that it? Dead in the water?
Yeah, it's not being used. It's just sort of must be sitting around on a few billboards somewhere or logo on bits of paper somewhere, but yeah, we haven't used it for quite some time.
So, the new slogan, will that be on a big billboard as you cruise into town?
We could certainly look at that. We've got billboards here, so we could certainly look at putting it up when we get to that stage of deciding what the new logo is. Deadline
for getting it, the new logo, slogan?
Councils, they don't move that fast, do they? So let's say 6 months.
Okay, what about that? Ashburton, moderate speed.
Yeah, well, that's, 6 months in the council process is probably quite quick. So, good things take time.
And that is Mayor Neil Brown of the Ashburton district, and what a good sport he is. A lot of your feedback coming in on the issue of the Northland rollout and trying to get in the queue to get your COVID jab. Penelope says people wanting jabs need to use a bit of logic and patience. Of course the system's going to crash if everyone over 50 in Northland phones on the same day. However, a lot of people have a different view. 27 times to the Northland DHB free phone for a COVID-19 booking to no avail, says this listener. Rattle your dags, team! ! Peter says, hi, similar experiences. Today we are two 70-year-olds wanting a vaccine in Whangarei. Email and phone, waste of time. What a terrible mistake to say they didn't expect such a demand. Really, says Peter. And Rob's got in touch to say he lives in Whangarei. Tried the vaccine booking line every day bar one since last Friday, at least 12 times a day, max low 20s, still haven't got through. Started the calls on Friday after I emailed and I got the we're too busy, call the number auto response, says Rob. And this listener says, I called Northland DHB over 50 times today trying to get a COVID injection appointment. Heard a message twice, but no success in getting through. And I should just say, after we've put that story out, we did get a response from the Northland DHB saying it's going to set up a call centre. So hopefully you will be able to get through shortly. E te iwi e hariaki nei e a checkpoint. The man who believes life in a boys' home was basically a criminal apprenticeship that turned him into a monster. The High Court pushes pause on a murder trial, and Fiji's lockdown lingers as it tries to shut down its largest surge of COVID cases. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love to hear from you all, especially about the Northland, well, the nail up there trying to get a COVID vaccine. How's it going for you? Have you tried to call the phone line? Did you manage to get a booking? Let us know about your experience. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And if you've got any ideas for Ashburton's new tagline or your own city or town, we would love to hear from you too. It is time now, though, for the headlines with Susanna.
Grey Power says the delays in the COVID-19 vaccination program in Northland is causing unnecessary stress for seniors. Northlanders are waiting on hold for up to 6 hours when trying to book their vaccinations, and Grey Power's Ron Thompson told Checkpoint the rollout was a shambles. The DHB says demand for the vaccine is greater than expected after it opened up the eligibility criteria last week to anyone over 50. DHB Chief Executive Dr Nick Chamberlain says it is setting up a call centre and extra staff have been brought in to handle the backlog. The disgraced businessman Ron Briley has given up his knighthood after pleading guilty last month to possessing child sex abuse material. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the 83-year-old Briley may no longer use the title Sir and has been asked to return his insignia. Ms Ardern began initiating the process to remove his knighthood last month. The Independent Police Conduct Authority has found 2 specialist officers were justified in firing shots at a wanted man in a high-speed pursuit on Auckland's Northern Motorway in 2018. The man suffered minor injuries and no one else was harmed. Police say the officers involved were part of a special tactics group trained to deal with extreme high-risk situations. Tributes are flowing for netball legend and Hamilton City Councillor Margaret Forsyth, who died today aged 58. Ms Forsyth, who was selected for the Silver Ferns as a 17-year-old and went on to play at 3 World Cups, was serving her 3rd term as a Hamilton councillor. A Wellington taxi company is being taken to the High Court by the Commerce Commission for alleged price fixing. The market watchdog alleges that the Hutton City Taxis Limited breached the Commerce Act in September by reaching an agreement with 2 competing firms to fix a minimum fare from Wellington Airport. If proven, the company could face fines up to $10 million. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Called Lisa Owen tēnei. Let's get down to the business news now with Nona. Nona, I heard there in the headlines a little bit about this Commerce Commission investigation. Tell us, they've had a busy day. What's going on?
Well, the one that we just heard about, which is the cartel allegation, it involves a taxi company called... let's see. It's called Hutt and City Taxis Limited, and they primarily are busy in the Hutt Valley. That's where they are, mostly known by. But they do also pick up fares at the airport. And what they did was they basically are accused of offering stickers to their competitors so that there would be a minimum $25 fare on the on-demand taxi stand. Now, that sort of behavior, according to the Commerce Commission, it falls under cartel type of behavior. It's anti-competitive. It's price fixing if it's proven in the court. But this particular case was, they stopped the conduct in November before new legislation was put in place. So if it had continued and it was in, say, April, when we have new legislation in place, it would be a criminal act, not a civil matter.
Right.
So what the court is going to do, what the Commerce Commission is going to do, is go to the court and ask for a judgment against the taxi company. But if it had occurred later, the same case, should it be proven, could result in a 7-year prison sentence.
Wow, that's some hefty stuff, isn't it?
It sure is. And so the fines are hefty regardless. We're talking about millions of dollars. Whether or not this happens in this case, we don't know. But it's just something to keep in mind that the Commerce Commission is certainly cracking down on any of this kind of behaviour.
And they've got another case in the pipeline,
this is a bigger case. It involves the ASB Bank. And what happened there, they self-reported in this case. They told the Commerce Commission.
You mean the bank put their hand up?
Yes, they said, hello, we've made a mistake. Oops. And it's going to cost us $8 million because we're going to have to compensate 78,000 customers. And what they did wrong was they, between the years, June 2015 and July 2019, anybody who varied their loan arrangements with the bank were not properly informed of the changes on how that variation might affect that loan. And that's required under the Act. You have to, if you change the conditions of your loan or you vary it in some way, whether it has to do with payments or terms or what have you, the bank is obliged to provide you with information about how that might affect your loan. And they didn't in this case. In these cases, 78,000 customers in this case. So what's going to happen is, depending on when you took your loan out, you're going to be compensated either $68, that's if your loan was taken out prior to June 2015, and if it was after the fact, it's $135.
So a pretty costly mistake when you add up
it sure does,
the huge number of customers.
And the Commerce Commission, accepted that the ASB owned up to the error. And so, of course, that's all that's going to be, going to happen in this case. It's a fairly hefty punishment, $8 million in any case. And they did self-report it. So, but the Commerce Commission, again, is quite quick to kind of bring these cases to public notice. And they certainly would like us to share that information.
And speaking of sharing information, Nona, do you have market numbers for us?
I do have some market numbers. Look, I did some checking on this. There apparently is a mildly positive tone going on in Asia today, and that's partly because some of the big cities in the world are reopening after COVID. New York City is planning to open fully in July. I know, go figure. We all sort of sit back and think, really? Okay, yes. Well, anyways, that was enough to lift the market. And guess what? Our own NZX Top 50 Index, it rose 143 points today. That's a 1.1% increase to 12,912. Big day on the market. The New Zealand dollar, 71.8 US cents. That's fairly steady to where it's been. 92.7 Australian and 51.7 pence. And just quickly, the Reserve Bank just decided to hold its official cash rate steady at 0.1%. It's waiting for further signs of a domestic economic recovery.
Kia ora, e hoa. And that was Nona Peltier with our business news there. 2 black caps have gone into isolation in India because of positive cases of COVID in their Kolkata Knight Riders IPL team. One of the 2 players to have caught COVID visited a hospital to see to an injury, and seemingly caught the virus there. Black caps Tim Seifert and Lockie Ferguson are in the team, which is coached by former Black Caps captain Brendan McCullum. Their latest game has been rescheduled, but the incident has cast doubt over whether the Indian Premier League should continue. The ABC's James Oaten reports.
Well, they could have a super over if a wicket falls.
There's plenty of imitations, but nothing matches the grandeur and spectacle of the Indian Premier League.
That's been hit like an absolute bullet.
This year's competition has been scaled back due to the pandemic. No crowds, limited stadiums, and players must live in a so-called bubble. But it hasn't been enough to block the virus. A match between the Kolkata Knight Riders and Royal Challengers has been postponed after 2 players tested positive.
It's a divisive matter.
That's international cricket commentator Prakash Wakankar. He says there have been concerns about the optics of holding the tournament and the resourcing it requires.
Are there any resources that are being deployed for the IPL from the state or the health authorities which could help the fight against COVID-19 in the country at this moment?
But there's also strong arguments for the IPL.
During the period of this horrific time that so many hundreds and thousands of people are going through, does the IPL offer that 3 or 4 hours of respite, relief?
He says the future of this year's tournament may rest on how far this outbreak has spread.
And if indeed that becomes something that is considered to be a larger collective health risk, then there can be no debate.
But there are larger debates. India's vaccine drive has been sputtering due to a shortfall in supply. The country, along with other developing nations, wants intellectual property rights to be temporarily waived to boost production. Wealthy countries have been against such proposals over concerns pharmaceutical companies would lose incentives to spend time and money developing new drugs. Australia hasn't blocked or endorsed the proposal. Dr. Abdul Ghaffur is an infectious disease expert at Apollo Hospital in Chennai. He says the more the virus spreads, the greater the risk of more aggressive variants.
A very, very unacceptable scenario. Think of the people dying across the world. No one is safe until everybody is safe.
This has been India's deadliest week so far. But many health experts here oppose the idea of a national lockdown.
The situation is not uniform everywhere. If you issue a nationwide lockdown, that will really affect the livelihood of the people across the country, even in places there is not a lot of COVID cases. What we should consider is lockdowns or curfews in areas where we are not able to manage the number of cases.
These lockdowns are being imposed more and more, but the worry is how far the virus has already raced ahead.
The ABC's James Oaten with that story. Fiji's border will remain closed until the government says it can stop the largest surge of COVID-19 cases in the country. Fiji has 51 active cases, 31 in the community, 16 in border quarantine, and 4 are being investigated for their source of transmission. The government also says it will not relax COVID-19 restrictions for any of the 6 containment zones across the main island, Vetulevu, until it's clear of the risks there. But as Christine Ravoy reports, the coronavirus is not the only thing the Fijians are having to deal with.
Floods brought on by heavy rain in the past week continue to threaten the containment areas of the capital Suva, Nausori, Lami, Rakiraki, Nandi and Lautoka. The Health Ministry says movement within these areas is limited. Secretary Dr. James Fong says with the pandemic and flooding crises, authorities are battling two fronts. He says this is why the government will not consider any international arrivals to Fiji.
The only exception are the Fijians who are travelling with who have been travelling for medical procedures, and those with special approval granted by the ministry. Our quarantine capacity has been directly and entirely dedicated toward the context of local cases.
Fiji health officials say a funeral, a sevens tournament and a garment factory have been identified as spread events of the highly infectious Indian variant of COVID-19. Tens of thousands of people have been impacted since the restrictions, including snap lockdowns and curfews, were imposed 2 weeks ago. Sarah Osborne of the Psychiatric Survivors Association is concerned about the homeless and says they are at a high risk of contracting COVID-19 because of their interaction with the public.
It is important for us to continue screening them after we had found a handful of them around the yellow zone area. So, and also not because they are moving around, but because it is their right as well. Their rights to health as well as ensuring that no one is left behind.
Meanwhile, the Health Ministry is rolling out its COVID-19 vaccination program in the Western Division. More than 20,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine arrived in the country last week and will be administered to high-risk groups. Nandi resident Prem Nair waited for hours at Prince Charles Park to get his first jab, and he's urging Fijians to get vaccinated.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. 2 hours or 4 hours doesn't matter now. It's a matter of life and death, and I think everybody should come and do it, and take time, because when you can be in the line in supermarket or in fish market, why can't here?
The Women's Crisis Centre warns of a continuous rise in domestic violence cases amid the COVID-19 restrictions. The centre's coordinator, Shamima Ali, says while staying at home is the safest course of action to take amid an outbreak, there is an ugly side to the lockdown measures. She says one case in the western town of Ba is of concern.
This is about a young woman who was pregnant and who was left out of her family home through domestic violence. She had nowhere to go, and the relative she was supposed to go to, her family didn't want her there. So she called us, and we were able to help her through with, with shelter, with food, and just taking care of her health.
Fiji has had 121 COVID-19 cases, 51 active, 68 recovered and 2 deaths reported since its first case in March last year. Health authorities are scrambling to screen and test thousands of people in the containment areas. Meanwhile, supermarkets and food outlets remain closed, but government food ration packs are being delivered to those who need them. International passenger flights are also on hold indefinitely, although the country is still receiving critical freight. Mo te hotaka o te haihiponei, ko Kristen Ravoy, aho.
Pacific Church ministers are stepping up to get their COVID vaccine and are encouraging their members to follow suit. More than 100 people lined up for their vaccine in Otaara today, hoping to pave the way in their communities. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and cameraman Nick Monroe filed this report.
9 church leaders and their families all set for their COVID vaccinations at the South Seas Otaara Vaccination Clinic, set up in the old Manukau Institute Tech building. Today's group is from the Ecclesia Wha'apotupatanga Keresiano Samoa Maunga Kia Synod in Auckland. They're hoping to lead by example, encouraging members of their community to book in to get their injection. Their invitations coincide with invitations for older Maori and Pacifica people in Auckland and their households to get their vaccinations. People living in South Auckland aged 65 and over are also encouraged to come forward now. In the queue was Church Minister of the Auckland Parish, Reverend Alva'a Enaliko.
Our role as ministers, we should be the one who leads. Because if we don't lead, then the people probably will not follow.
Minister Fa'aletawa was waiting too. He says it's vital the Pacifica community gets good, clear information.
As a good example with the measles in Samoa, we were back from Samoa, I think people still have that little bit of fear and doubt. And it's just great to see politicians lead by example and the community leaders like the church pastors. Yeah. So I think there's still that little, but it's good to get rid of those fears and those doubts and actually come out and do what needs to be done.
And their message for those worried.
They shouldn't be worried. It's just like any other injections that you get from your GP, so there's nothing.
Very quick. I don't know what the whole fuss is about, but yeah, it's really quick.
Reverend Dr. Fiatunai Liua'ana is confident the church leaders will inspire others to do the same.
To lead this and be the example and role model and say to our church people, look, it's easy. We've done it. I'm pretty sure you can all do it.
Despite their best efforts, Dr. Liua'ana says there's still anxiety in the community because of the misinformation that's circulating.
A lot of them have been getting this mail through their mailbox by those who are against the vaccination, and it's not helping. This is a Pacific site, which gives a lot of comfort for Pacific people, and plus those who are coming out to visit the churches, they're actually bringing Samoan doctors who can actually speak Samoan and Samoan nurses, and that really helps.
He says the news of the Cook Islands travel bubble is also an incentive to get vaccinated for those wanting to visit home.
For those in Samoa, this is one of the things I think for us Samoans to get vaccinated, because we don't know down the road, the government in Samoa said, look, we're going to open up the borders, but this is the criteria, you have to be vaccinated. So part of the reason why, because a lot of our people really want to get back. They do. I think they miss their families, and this is another pathway towards it. So don't leave it till too late and then find out that you can't go because you haven't been vaccinated.
As part of the vaccination process here at the Otaara Vaccination Clinic, there's also a selfie booth which greets you at the end. This was dreamt up by their youth team Bubblegum, which encourages people to take to social media and spread awareness about getting your vaccine. There are 2 other Auckland synods in Waitakere and Waitemata. Church ministers from the Ecclesia Wha'apotupatanga Keresiano Samoa Maunga Kia Synod are hoping they'll also come forward for their vaccinations when it's time in the next few months. For Checkpoint, Louise Tanuth.
And if you were listening to Louise and Nick's piece there, we'll put the video up on our Facebook page so you can check it out too. It is 8 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A lot of you have been getting in touch about the situation up in Northland, trying to get your jab there in Whangarei. Nikki says, I'm just over 60. I turned up as an unbooked walk-in to the vaccination centre last Wednesday at 3 p.m. Waited no more than half an hour. I have received an appointment for my second vaccination today. What amazes me, though, is that my son and my husband, both doctors, didn't get their jabs before me, says Nikki. Another person says, we're in medical specialist rooms in Whangarei, had our first COVID shot, told to turn up for the second without the need for an appointment. This was reinforced in an email. We have tried twice and been turned away because we have no appointments. We can't get through either on phone lines. Spoken with a few of our colleagues and they are the same. 3 exclamation marks. Do keep your feedback coming. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Hey, Muriaki in Pitapita Kōrero. After the news at 6, we dig into the government's multi-billion-dollar shovel-ready projects. What's fact and what's fiction? A man who has spent many years of his life in prison says he learnt his trade while in boys' homes. 47-year-old Daniel Ray has given evidence to the Royal Commission into Abuse in Care as it focuses on residential care. Our reporter Andrew McRae is at the hearing and filed this report.
Daniel Ray of Ngāti Toa Rangatira has been in and out of jail serving 18 years all up. He first went into care at the age of 13, spending time at a family home and then boys' homes, ending at Kohateri Boys Training Centre. He says violence permeated through all of the homes he was in and it started from day one.
Everyone's seen those prison movies with the whip-cracking guard that comes out and gives the welcome to jail speech. It's a real thing. It is actually a real thing. I don't know if they get it from the movies or the movies get it from them, but it's a real thing. And it was like, look, you're going to go fine here as long as you do exactly what you're told. If you don't, some sort of painful punishment physically is going to be inflicted on you. And this is not maybe, this is what's going to happen.
He says there was always a culture of extreme violence and no narking, which was ingrained in him from the early days of residential care.
And it's continued right up to present, where even today, me sitting here makes me feel like death. And it'd be almost preferable than sitting here doing this.
At Kohateri, he spent 10 spells in the secure unit, a total of 154 days. Apart from daily physical education, the rest of the time was spent on his own. Daniel Ray says all he really learned in care was how to improve his criminal skill set.
How to fight better, how to fight more than one person, how to make improvised weapons, how to steal cars, how to commit successful arson if necessary, concealment techniques of hiding contraband that are used in prison worldwide. We're kids, don't forget. It's not Shawshank Redemption, we're tiny children. Some of us are real small kids. And some of us were huge. All the stuff you don't need to know, really.
Mr. Ray says he has destroyed his life with drugs, alcohol and with a casual attitude to violence, all learnt in boys' homes. He says it turned him into a monster.
I'm still afflicted by the same feelings. I'm still affected by the past. And the reality is, it's never going to go away.
He says there are 2 Daniels. One he never wanted to be, broody, dark and sometimes violent, and the other light-hearted, smart and accomplished, and he wishes he was always the second one. Daniel Ray left the hearing with a strong message.
Don't let this happen again to anyone, please. For God's sake, don't. Because it's just created, it's a petri dish and a training ground that will continue and perpetuate violent criminality far into the future.
Daniel Ray's been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress and a generalised anxiety disorder. For Checkpoint, ko Andrew McRae tēnei.
Let's head to the UK now, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson says there's a good chance social distancing rules can end in England next month. Boris Johnson says if COVID cases remain low and variants don't take hold, the restrictions will be eased on the 21st of June. However, there's nervousness about whether people should press go on booking overseas holidays. The BBC's Ian Watson has the details.
For so long now, the message has been to stay apart. But today, the Prime Minister was sounding optimistic that we could be able to move closer next month.
It looks to me as though June the 21st we'll be able to say, social distancing as we currently have to do it, the 1 metre plus. I think we've got a good chance of being able to dispense with the 1 metre plus.
That would make entertainment venues more viable, but the government's review on social distancing in England has yet to report, and it's possible we might still be advised to wear masks in cinemas and theatres and on public transport. But the prospect of spring and summer sun seems to be moving closer. Later this week, the government's expected to confirm it's lifting the ban on holidays abroad from England on May the 17th. And today, the EU raised the prospect of allowing non-essential travel from countries with good rates of vaccination, such as the UK. But the government will impose a range of restrictions on travellers when they return home. A traffic light system of restrictions will be introduced in England from May the 17th. If you come back from a country on the red list, you'll need to book expensive hotel quarantine. If you're returning from a country on a new amber list, you'll have to self-isolate at home. Initially, a small group of countries with high vaccination rates or low levels of virus will be on a green list. If you've visited any of these, you won't need to quarantine so long as you have proof of a negative test. But here at Westminster, a cross-party group of MPs is rather cross about the prospect of reopening foreign travel in just a couple of weeks' time. They're accusing the Prime Minister of potentially snatching defeat from the jaws of a victorious vaccination programme. They say the way in which you'd allow foreign travel to go ahead could be seriously flawed.
When you've got surges happening across the world, which are likely going to be countries that end up on a red list, the people coming in from those countries will be mixing relatively freely with people from green countries and amber countries in those arrival halls. Well, we are urging extreme caution and are actually asking the government to discourage leisure travel at this time.
The Labour leader also urged the government to proceed with caution.
And that report was from Ian Watson. So, on the issue of jabs in Northland, Vivian's got in touch with some good advice here. She says that she booked online via email using the address on the Northland DHB website, but didn't receive a response to her email. However, she turned up this afternoon at the appointment time that she thought was hers and was accepted as having a valid appointment. She's suggesting covid.bookings@northlanddhb.org.nz might be the answer to some of the problems you're facing. covid.bookings@northlanddhb.org.nz on Ashburton and some possible taglines for them. Ashburton grows on you. Ashburton, we're on Facebook. Ashburton, halfway to somewhere. And this one, Ashburton, only 651 kilometres to Palmerston North. That is a high degree of confidence from someone living in Palmerston North. Is that justified? Let me know. 2101.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei Atau at tēnei. A Northland Grey Power representative is labelling the vaccine rollout in his region a shambles. Northlanders are waiting more than 6 hours on the phone to book their vaccine, with some seniors turned away while trying to attempt a walk-in appointment. Ron Thompson told Checkpoint he knows of several elderly people who haven't been able to get a vaccination appointment.
And now I'm finding that there's been people down there queuing. I don't know where they're queuing in Whangarei. They've waited 2 to 3 hours. That's ridiculous.
Ron Thompson now wants health officials to bring GPs in to help with the rollout. The Northland DHB says it is setting up a call centre so the community can easily request an appointment. After walkouts, tears, hongi and hariru, Far North councillors have voted to introduce Māori wards. Last year, most councillors opposed the idea, opting for a public poll instead, but an extraordinary meeting was held today to discuss the issue again. Some councillors expressed fiery opposition to the wards, disappointing dozens of Hapu representatives who gathered for the hui. But their worries disappeared when Mayor John Carter announced the majority, which was met with applause. About 50% of Far North residents are Māori. CoreLogic's latest release of its house price index suggests that government efforts in March to cool the property market struggled to have any immediate impact. Figures report that nationwide values increased by a further 3.1% in April. Countrywide, CoreLogic's year-on-year price growth now sits at just over 18%. Head of Research Nick Goodall says there has been a recent fall in requests for housing valuations, which could be the first signs of reduced demand.
And what we have seen is the demand for these valuations and the amount of these valuations that are being ordered by the banks has reduced throughout April. There's certain signs there where there are fewer buyers out in the market talking to banks about issuing mortgages to buy another property.
Nick Goodall says the return of stiffer lending rules should cool the market from now until the end of the year. Samoa's head of state has called for a second election to bring an end to a deadlock in Parliament. The caretaker Human Rights Protection Party and the newcomer Fast Party have been tied on 26 seats each since last month's election. The head of state, Tui Maleali'i Whano Va'aletoa Sualauvi II, announced his intention to call a second election this morning. However, Fast Party leader Fiame Naomi Mataafa has declared her displeasure.
I was taken aback by such proposed action by the head of state. In short, I do not consider that the head of state has the constitutional power to call new elections at this time.
A Fast Party challenge against the appointment of an additional women's seat, which created the deadlock, will be heard in Samoa's Supreme Court tomorrow. The number of COVID infections in India has officially passed 20 million cases, even as the government says infection rates are coming down. India says infections have consistently dropped since last Friday, when it recorded more than 400,000 cases. It reported just under 356,000 cases today. Experts say the number of deaths and infections are being underreported. In the capital, Delhi, an oxygen crunch has shown no signs of abating and people are struggling for treatment. Victoria University staff will meet with students tomorrow following allegations of sexual misconduct at a Wellington Hall of Residence. Residents in the Te Puni Village Hall are calling for transparency in a letter to the university last week and say management failed to act on allegations of sexual misconduct and harm. A meeting will be held tomorrow between Te Puni residents, the Students' Association, the university and police to ensure people know how to report sexual harm. A Victoria University spokesperson says an investigation is underway but would not confirm whether a formal complaint has been laid. The police in Christchurch are treating a death at a social housing unit as unexplained. They were called to the Sydenham home just before 3 this afternoon and are now investigating the scene. The death follows a shooting at another social housing unit in the city on Sunday. KiwiRail is cautious about offering any solution to a rickety bridge that trucks use to carry a large proportion of the country's vegetables in the slopes between Mount Ruapehu. The Ruapehu District Council says it's no longer safe to truck produce over the busy but one-lane and century-old Mangitete rail overbridge near Ohakune. Locals who say they have no choice but to break the weight limits on the old bridge want a level crossing put in instead, urgently. But KiwiRail says it is reluctant due to the risk of collisions, and if it did add one, it would want it to go via a bridge or tunnel. It says it's happy to meet the council to talk it through. It's coming up to 6:05. Netball is mourning the loss of former Silver Fern Margaret Forsyth, who has died of cancer. She was 58. First selected for the Silver Ferns in 1979 as a 17-year-old, Forsyth played 64 tests, including 3 World Cups, where she won titles in 1979 and 1987. She later went into coaching and was head coach of the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic in 2017 and 2018. Samoa Rugby wants greater clarity around the makeup of the inaugural Moana Pacifica Super Rugby side. The New Zealand-based team and the Fijian Ndrua are set to join an expanded competition from next year. Moana Pacifica General Manager Kevin Senio has said 80% of their players would be already capped by Samoa or Tonga or on that pathway. But Manu Samoa coach Seilala Mapusua is concerned players with dual eligibility could still end up playing for the All Blacks.
There is a genuine concern around, it's easy for players to to say they're going to play for Samoa, they're going to play for Tonga, and as you said, still end up in the black jersey, which kind of goes against everything this team should be standing for.
Meanwhile, the Highlanders have confirmed their third-round Trans-Tasman match against the Melbourne Rebels will be played in Queenstown. All white, Chris Wood scored his 150th goal in English football, but he wasn't celebrating after his Burnley side was beaten 2-1 by West Ham in the English Premier League. Mark Selby has won his 4th World Snooker Championship title and with it almost $1 million in prize money. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, our geography expert Louise Richards is back again. She's joined by Robin Cairns to talk about the significance of place names. In Smart Talk, Pip Adam discusses her novel Nothing to See, one of the most talked about books of 2020, and this highlighted the 2020 Word Christchurch Spring Festival. And as more companies are rolling out carbon dioxide emission labels on products to help us make greener choices, our climate question tonight, is carbon the new calorie? On Nights with me, Charlotte Ryan, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, including Taumaranui and Taupo, fine weather. Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine with patches of fog inland tonight. Taranaki to Kapiti, including Taihape, partly cloudy with isolated light showers about the ranges. For Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine weather. Canterbury, fine today but partly cloudy tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, cloudy with isolated showers but rain south of the glaciers with heavy and possibly thundery falls, spreading north late tonight, then clearing to fine weather from Hokitika south tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, scattered rain, clearing and becoming fine tomorrow morning. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods tonight, fine weather tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. No mai hoki mai, you're tuned in to Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A regional New Zealand mayor says the government's forecast of 20,000 new jobs through its multi-billion-dollar shovel-ready projects scheme always seemed too good to be true. Before last year's election, the government announced it would pump $2.6 billion into more than 150 shovel-ready projects to create jobs and kickstart the country's COVID rebuild. But it's now slashed that number to fewer than 12,000 jobs. Nick Trubridge reports.
It sits near the bottom of the shovel-ready list, Te Kuiti's new sports stadium, project value $3.5 million, amount funded $500,000. Except this shovel-ready project is yet to break ground, according to Waitomo Mayor John Robertson.
No, it hasn't started. It's still in the completion of a business plan process, but its proposer is a community trust, and they're expecting that the project will start within the next year.
Te Kuiti's sports stadium is just one small project of more than 150 that the taxpayer is funding to the tune of $2.6 billion through the government's shovel-ready scheme, pitched as an infrastructure investment to create jobs and kickstart the COVID-19 rebuild. Pre-election, Finance Minister Grant Robertson touted a forecast that 20,000 jobs would be created by the package. But in response to written parliamentary questions by opposition MP Louise Upston, Mr Robertson now says the forecast is for 11,740 jobs, a drop of more than 8,000. Back in the Waitomo district, Mayor John Robertson reckons that initial forecast always seemed far-fetched.
The concept that you could put billions of dollars into communities through New Zealand and expect immediate sort of shovel-ready results on big infrastructure projects was a concept that really had a lot of risk, because on a lot of those projects, big projects are slow to get started. They need design, engineers and so on. Some of the skills were overseas and not in New Zealand. And so for stimulus for local communities to suddenly get employment, it was somewhat unrealistic to expect jobs to be suddenly created in such quick time.
The Mayor says a number of projects were put forward in Waitomo District. He says funding for the Te Kuiti Sports Stadium is there and ready to be used. He describes the stadium project as on the drawing board and expected to take place, but doesn't believe that'll be the case for all of the so-called shovel-ready projects.
The so much money put out. It is hard to. It's going to be interesting to see how much of it actually hit the ground.
There's also some doubt, he says, in local government circles that the Shovel Ready scheme could deliver on promises like job creation.
From a council's perspective, they weren't meant to be in projects that were within what we call the long-term plans of councils. So there was a fair bit of scepticism as to whether this could work that quickly. We applauded the employment subsidy programs that were going on for industries that were really impacted, like tourism and Waitomo, the Waitomo Caves projects. But this project, the shovel-ready projects, realistically could not have delivered jobs quickly in the way that perhaps the policymakers expected.
Meanwhile, Grant Robertson says he does not believe the 20,000 jobs forecast was misleading.
So the initial number was simply adding up what all of the outside parties who had proposed projects to us said would be the number of jobs. When we do the due diligence, when we do the final contracting, we come up with the final number. So that was a number based on the projects we had approved in principle, given by other people.
As for the new forecast, that's 11,740 jobs, Louise Upston claims they're not necessarily brand new full-time jobs for people who weren't working previously.
When you start to dig into it, some of the jobs are for consultants and engineers and people who are already in work, as opposed to the intention of this jobs plan, 20,000 new jobs, was aimed at supporting people who'd lost jobs to get into work with the Shovel Ready initiatives.
Grant Robertson says Crown Infrastructure Partners has done its own due diligence on how many full-time positions will be created by the Shovel Ready projects. Only then, 10 months after the 20,000 jobs forecast was flashed in headlines, was the significantly lower forecast discovered. For Checkpoint, Nick Trowbridge.
The Prime Minister says the government has nothing to hide over a report commissioned on how to better uphold Indigenous rights. The Maori Development Minister, Willie Jackson, has prepared a draft paper setting out the next steps the government could take in response to the He Puapua report, which he says will go to Cabinet soon. However, ACT and National are crying foul, saying the government's been trying to keep the report and any proposals under the radar. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
The He Puapua report was first given to government in 2019, but it was the National Party who publicly released it in full at the weekend. The report suggested a separate Māori Parliament or upper house, separate court and justice systems, and Māori ownership of foreshore and seabed, as well as recommendations on cultural rights and equity. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says there is a good reason the report had not yet been released prior.
They did not come back to Cabinet, it had not been approved by Cabinet, and it was not government policy. That was the reason it had not been released, is because it did not have our final sign-off and it was not our final declaration plan.
However, National leader Judith Collins is accusing the government of already implementing plans from the report.
We've seen the Cabinet papers that have actually been discussed, and particularly around the Māori Health Authority, and we've saw what happened with the local government situation, neither of which, by the way, were actually campaigned on or mentioned in the election campaign only a few months ago.
Judith Collins has accused the government of separatism through its policies. But the Health Minister Andrew Little, who recently announced the government's plan for a Māori Health Authority, says he hasn't even read the He Puapua report. And he wasn't impressed with Ms Collins' accusations.
It's just embarrassing in this day and age that a political leader of a major political party would talk in that way. We have major equity concerns with Māori health outcomes, but actually the Crown has obligations under the treaty, and the principal obligation is partnership.
This afternoon, the ACT Party revealed that the Māori Development Minister, Willie Jackson, received 3 papers last month about the report, including a draft Cabinet paper for feedback. Willie Jackson doesn't have a day for when the report will go to Cabinet, but it will happen soon. He says there is a lot in the report about improving equity that isn't at all extreme.
It's just the standard kaupapa that we're doing now, that the former government did. I mean, there's areas like Māori Parliament that the Prime Minister's ruled out. We support that.
However, Axe David Seymour says the report should never have had to go through the Ombudsman to be released.
I'm hearing more and more anxiety and division, and I think the government's approach is actually fueling it. They should just come out and say, this is the report. We are looking to go towards what the UN has said and match its declaration. If that's their view, then they should come out and say it. I think that would be a much more honest way to have the conversation.
Ms Ardern says the report was intended to start that conversation. But early debate has been less than edifying.
I have to say, the groundwork for us being able to have a decent conversation about these issues has not been well established by the debate I have seen from members of this House.
Jacinda Ardern says Te Puni Kōkiri did not want the report released early, as it might have been misunderstood as agreed government policy, a point that Ardern says now has been proven. From Parliament, Ko Charlie Drever, DNA.
It's 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The trial of a man charged with the murder of Whanganui woman Jasmine Wilson has been postponed. Zane Paora Wallace, Jasmine's boyfriend, pleaded not guilty to her murder. Hamish Cardwell was at the High Court in Wellington.
For the family of Jasmine Wilson, today was going to be a gut-wrenching day in court. Her father, Chris Wilson, was supposed to be giving evidence, with her mother and sister also expected to speak this week, in the murder trial of Jasmine's boyfriend, Zane Paora Wallace. Instead, Justice Gillian Mellon ground proceedings to a halt, saying the trial cannot continue because an update to the medical evidence needs to be considered.
Unfortunately, that cannot be done in the time frame of this trial. And the result is that it's not in the interests of justice for the trial to continue in relation to Zane Wallace.
Earlier, the court was told the 30-year-old mother of two was left badly beaten and barely conscious at Whanganui Hospital in July 2019, dying 2 days later. The Crown argues this was the culmination of 9 months of violence, the length of their relationship, that Jasmine suffered at the hands of Zane Wallace. His charges include murder, assaulting a woman, and a raft of threatening to kill and harm charges, all of which he denies. All up, about 100 witnesses were expected to give evidence in the trial set down for 6 weeks. Now her family's gruelling wait for closure continues. Jasmine's father, Chris Wilson, spoke to RNZ outside court.
I thought we would go and get the trial over and done with and get it out of the way, It's been a long road to get here. It's really difficult for families, We can't even begin to start healing until we've got a conviction or not a conviction. And
Chris Wilson says the family will just have to have patience.
Of course, we're a little bit disappointed, but we've just got to let the system take its course and get justice for Jazz.
The jury will continue to hear the case against Leanne Michelle Wallace, Zane's mother, who faces a charge of perverting the course of justice. Justice Mellon said the jury would have to disregard some evidence it had already heard, including disturbing, threatening calls between Mr. Wallace and Ms. Wilson while he was in prison.
I do apologise that you had to sit through those prison calls, which I'm sure you would not have found particularly easy or nice or whatever reaction you had to them.
Leanne Michelle Wallace's trial resumes tomorrow. Zane Wallace will appear again in court on July the 27th, where the case and any future trial will be discussed. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi pone, ko Hamish Cardwell aho.
Few countries have suffered as acutely from COVID-19 as Brazil. A congressional inquiry is now underway into the government's handling of the pandemic, and it's hearing from former ministers fired by President Bolsonaro. Only 1 in 7 Brazilians have received the first dose, with many states now reporting shortages. The BBC's Mark Lowen has followed the rollout in one of the most remote areas of the country, the islands of Bailique in the Amazon.
Well, the sunrise has just broken through the rain clouds here above the Amazon River in Brazil's northernmost region of Amapá as we drive out along pretty bumpy dirt roads through the rainforest, following a convoy of healthcare workers as they deliver COVID vaccines to the most remote corners of this country. As vacinas
As they load cool boxes carrying the vaccines into wooden motorboats, healthcare worker Dominique Oliveira says the AstraZeneca inside must remain at -8 degrees, and once opened, the doses have to be used within 48 hours. The boats take us past grazing water buffalo to the archipelago of Bailik, population 13,000. As the vaccines are opened, Hamilton Lopez receives the first treasure for this island.
I caught the virus a year ago and I saw death. I drank lemon and ginger tea. We are far from the city and people can't afford to go there by boat. It's a blessing from God that they come to our homes.
As beautiful as these villages look, surrounded by coconut trees and tall grasses, these are extremely vulnerable places with no clinics nearby, poor sanitation, and added to that, erosion that's threatening the water and soil.
São comunidades distantes.
Carleni Lamberghi leads the healthcare team.
O índice de contaminação é muito grande.
The transmission rate is very high here. Hygiene is patchy, there is no filtered water, they live together. If one gets infected, it can bring down the whole island. They are abandoned by the government. So when we brought the first doses, we all cried because we were bringing hope here.
On a larger island, the medics call residents to queue up at the school to be vaccinated. But they're limited by Brazil's poor supply. The government of President Bolsonaro is criticised for failing to procure doses in time, with his scepticism towards the virus partly blamed for the death toll now exceeding 400,000, among them the brother of Alacide Correa.
I am so sad. I still can't believe that he's dead. If he'd been vaccinated in time, he would have been saved. The government didn't care about the pandemic at the start. The fact that we are getting the vaccine here is an honor for us.
The challenge is not just delivering the doses to these rural, cut-off communities, but breaking through widespread vaccine hesitancy here, mainly due to a lack of education and information. On her porch, 62-year-old Angela Maria Cordeiro watches the passing medics.
Do you think some people are worried about getting the vaccine?
Yes, my son is like that. I called, come and get the vaccine, but he said no.
At the end of 2 days and 500 vaccine doses, the medics leave and Bailik returns to its isolation. COVID has torn through this country, but a shield has now arrived for those here, brought along the mighty Amazon, a source of life.
People of East Asian background say racial abuse has increased dramatically since the COVID pandemic began. In the US Congress has just passed a hate crime bill giving a specific protection to Asians. In the UK, the number of such crimes reported to police in London alone tripled at the start of the pandemic. But campaigners and police agree many go unreported. The BBC's Fergal Keane has been meeting victims of the attacks.
A little old white lady, she just stared at me and she using her fingers pointing to me and shouting on me, "You Chinese virus, just go back your country."
The tall young white man who was sat next to me started making a noise, trying to get phlegm up from his throat. And when the train stopped at the station, he spat at me.
The voices of Yan Ma and Fung Tan abused here on the streets of London since the pandemic began. Jabaz Lam, who runs the Chinese Community Centre in Hackney, says instances of racist abuse have increased dramatically.
Since the beginning of the virus, before it even became a pandemic, racial attack against East and Southeast Asians has been exploding. The situation is worrying. Everyday abuse are happening. This really affects both the emotional and mental health and the whole atmosphere in the community.
So you were running down here, what happened?
They stopped their car and shouted at me and then attacked me on the pavement.
There's been physical abuse too. Fong Wang, an academic at the University of Southampton, was jogging near his home when racist comments were shouted from a car. When he challenged the abusers, he was attacked.
They punched me on my face. My nose was badly hit. I left a lot of blood on the ground.
Anybody of Asian appearance can be targeted. Dan Su runs a thriving Korean supermarket. He's a symbol of a family that's fully integrated into British society. But recently his wife and baby daughter were racially abused in an affluent West London suburb.
I was just so disappointed. I remember very clearly feeling how sad I was, because this is the country that I was born in and I grew up in, and I love everything about this country, and this rise of, I suppose, racism really disappoints me, because this is my country as well.
And that report was by the BBC's Fergal Keane. Instagram is being urged to clamp down on accounts that promote and sell an illegal weight gain drug that can cause serious harm. Apetamin, an unlicensed appetite stimulant, is being celebrated by influencers across the globe who promote it as a quick fix for women wanting to gain a curvy body shape. The BBC's Stephanie Prentice reports.
I'm a savage, classy, bougie, ratchet.
There's a certain look on social media that's grown in popularity over the past few years. Seen in music videos and the biggest TikTok dance crazes, it's an hourglass shape called slim thick and means being curvy and skinny at the same time. Kylie Jenner, Kim Kardashian and Cardi B are celebrated examples in pop culture.
I know that's right. Big bag, pussy, not the belly band, take a member list.
But it's a difficult body ideal to achieve, and many have been driven to look for shortcuts. Influencers all over the world can be found promoting apetamin, a medicine that's made in India and markets itself as a health product, but is known to fast-track weight gain.
I went from 108 pounds to I'm now 139 pounds. I took tips and tricks from different Instagrammers.
If any of you guys live in Brooklyn, just DM me on Instagram and ask me where I got it from.
Apetamin is illegal in the UK and in the US, and side effects can include liver failure. British influencer Vanessa found it online after Googling how to gain curves.
I'm trying to be thicker. In today's society, it's very, very different, and I'm not a supermodel. I can't get money off my slim figure.
She says it made her unwell, and she wants social media companies to do more to protect influencers.
And that was Stephanie Prentice with that report. So much feedback from you all about, getting your COVID jab up in Northland. This from Ian. Tēnā koe, Lisa. I went into Kaitaia Hospital this morning and had my vaccination. A bit of a wait, but all the staff doing their best and all very pleasant and efficient. Kia ora rā, says Ian. Well, nā mihi mō te rā. E ho, thank you so much for your feedback. Someone else says, give the vaccines to GPs to distribute to their patients. They know how to vaccinate, how to contact patients, how to do recalls, etc., especially for older patients who struggle to travel any distance and prefer to come to somewhere and someone they trust. This person says the system's impossible. When you finally get through on the phone, get booked into the wrong place and they can't change it, forcing people to travel impossible distances from home. The government should stop spending money on advertising the vaccine and get the rollout organised properly. Another person says, wonder how the older people are coping if they get sent a link and they don't have a computer or a smartphone. We will be back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. At least 20 people have been killed and more than 70 injured after several train carriages plunged to the ground when a Mexico City overpass collapsed. The Northland DHB says it's setting up a call centre to ease delays in booking COVID-19 vaccinations. The number of COVID-19 cases in India has officially passed 20 million, although the government claims the rate of infections are coming down, while critics say it is under-reporting the true figures. Far North District councillors have voted to introduce Maori wards in next year's elections. Those are the headlines. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
A lot of our young, strong workers have gone off to the meatworks in Invercargill.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
People born under 45 versus older 45, we get a really big difference in the pronunciation of this word. Worry.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10.